we have another interesting panel coming right now, titled Search for a New World Order in the Mediterranean. And I'm happy that Mr. Edward Mortimer kindly agreed to moderate that panel, and I will give floor to him and to introduce his guests. Thank you.
Miriam, thank you very much indeed. Nick Gowing is what they call a hard act to follow, and I can see that the room was full for him, and it seems to be rather empty for me. But never mind. I'm confident, as Miriam is, that it will fill up with time. We come now a little bit narrowing and maybe sharpening the focus, because really I think the power of the future, we were talking about the world, and now we are going to talk about a particular part of the world, which is the Mediterranean. And it's a very interesting part of the world, of course, but it happens to be, I think, particularly interesting this year. Dramatic events have been happening almost all around the Mediterranean. We have seen what has been popularly called the Arab Spring. Some people called it the Arab Awakening. Other people say, well, but the spring is being, or will be soon followed by an autumn, and we shouldn't get too excited about it. It already hasn't perhaps developed in quite the way that many of us hoped in January and February. Meanwhile, on this side of the Mediterranean, we have had many crises, particularly financial and monetary crises. And we have seen on both sides of the Mediterranean large numbers of discontented people being mobilized and expressing their discontent, albeit probably for very different reasons. But this is something I think we will find out about in the course of our discussion. We have again 4 panelists. The first is the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Torbjørn Jagland, who is a very distinguished person, very well qualified to speak about this, even if Norway is quite a long way from the Mediterranean, and he is Norwegian, and he is a former Prime Minister of Norway. He is also the chairman of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, which awards the annual Nobel Peace Prize. I hesitate to speculate whether that is the reason why he was not on the same panel as one of the members of the previous one. We shall, but he is also playing a very important role in reforming and, as the United Nations likes to say, revitalizing the Council of Europe. And I was, in a way, a beneficiary of that this year, because he very kindly asked me to be the rapporteur for a panel of eminent persons, 9 eminent Europeans who came together to consider the issue of living together in 21st century Europe. And one of the things these 9 persons found in the course of their deliberations was that we cannot live just together like Europeans or as Europeans and ignore what is going on around us in the rest of the world, and particularly in the Mediterranean, which is half European and half not. So I think he will, I'm sure, set the Mediterranean, or talk a bit about how the Mediterranean looks from Europe and what Europeans need to be doing. And I think that many of us, when we speak about the Mediterranean, have in mind the name of a great French historian of the last century, Fernand Braudel, who wrote about the Mediterranean world in the age of Philip II. And then I think this was something which was rediscovered, because, of course, in the Roman Empire, it was Mare Nostrum, and both sides were brought together under a single authority. But in more recent times, they have often seen each other as being far apart. And maybe that is something we need to rethink. And maybe Mr. Jagland will have something to say about that. After him, we shall have another European speaker, Mr. Przemysl Sobotka, who is the first Vice President of the Senate of the Czech Republic. Again, the Czech Republic is not a Mediterranean country, but perhaps as I am currently living in Austria, I might be permitted to remind you that 100 years ago, Prague and Bled were part of the same state, and it was a state with the Mediterranean littoral. And I think the people of Central Europe are perhaps more involved with the Mediterranean than some of us think or remember. And that will be an additional reason for hearing his point of view. He, before he became a politician, made his career in medicine, and so maybe he can also prescribe some remedies for the difficulties that Europe and the Mediterranean are currently suffering from. Then we will hear from Ambassador Khemais Jinawi, State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Tunisia. Now, Tunisia, I think, was already mentioned in the previous panel, and it's and I gather in the youth forum this morning. It's a country which has thrust itself into the world's eye this year. It was in January in Tunisia that the first successful Arab revolution took place, and really acted as the trigger for these movements that we have seen in so many parts of the Arab world. Mr. Jinawi is a very experienced diplomat. He has been ambassador of Tunisia in my country, the United Kingdom, and also in Russia. So I think, again, he is very well placed to give a European perspective to the events that have been happening on the southern side of the Mediterranean. And finally, we shall hear from Mr. Wadi Abu Nasser, who is the director of the International Center for Consultations in Israel. And I asked him, what should I say about you? And he said, and I first of all said, should I introduce you as an Israeli or a Palestinian? And he said, both. And then he said, and also as a Catholic, because he has been the spokesman for two popes, the late John Paul II and the current Pope, Benedict XVI, on their visits to the Holy Land. So that is quite a responsibility. He comments on Israeli affairs in Arab media and on Arab affairs in Israeli media. And I think that's one of the questions that the world has been asking. What do these developments and changes in the Arab world mean for the Arab-Israel conflict? And I can't think of anyone better qualified to advise us on that than Mr. Abu Nasser. So I am given very strict instructions, and they have been given very strict instructions, that they should each have only 5 minutes at the beginning, but that they will have plenty of time afterwards to answer your questions. So with that, let me ask Mr. Jagland to start with his 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Edward, and ladies and gentlemen. This is a very challenging theme to talk about. And first you have to think about what is a new world order. They have spoken about that in the first panel. But I had to go to Google to find out what it is. And I got 3 options. One was that it is a divinely scheme for unification of the world based on equity and justice. The second option was that it is a conspiracy entertained by people gathering in conferences like this to achieve global domination based on the globalized forces. But the third option is the most relevant, I think, for us, and it is that it is a major shift in political thinking and distribution of power in the world. And I think that is what is on now. It has been on for quite a long time. The world order we have today, and which is changing, was established after the Second World War. The Only winner of the Second World War was United States. Actually, all the other winners were exhausted. So United States could then take the lead in the world, and we got also all the global institutions, and Europe was reorganized based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the global, this new global organization. Now things are changing again very thoroughly. I think it's first started when the Berlin Wall came down. And what is going on in the Mediterranean, there are many differences, but also one similarity, namely that the changes are coming from within, which also was the case in Eastern Europe. This reminds me of what the philosopher, French philosopher Paul Valéry said, that reality always contradict the common wisdom, the conventional wisdom, and contradicts all predictions. You will recall that I think it was in May 1989, there was a summit in Paris to celebrate the French Revolution from 1789. And all the heads of states, they issued a declaration saying that there would be no new revolutions in Europe. That was 3 months before the Berlin Wall came down. So, but, I mean, conventional wisdom was that everything had happened in Europe, nothing new could happen, and that the communist regimes would last for another 100 years. But what was reality was that the communist regimes undermined themselves because they were not able to be innovative technologically and economically. So people climbed up on the Berlin Wall because they could watch what was the difference between the West and East on television. And they couldn't tolerate this any longer. So, and this is more or less the same as I see it, what's happening in the Mediterranean and in the Middle East, in the Arab world. The Arab world has been lagging down for 30 years because of lack of innovation, because of lack of freedom, because of corruption, which comes from the lack of freedom, the lack of checks and balances in the system. And at the end of the day, people couldn't tolerate it any longer. So the revolution came with the help, not with the help of television, like in Berlin, but with the help of the social media. So I think at late as Christmas last year, most of the Western powers still believed that nothing would change in the Middle East. But it started to change during the Christmas and in January, like it did in 1989. Nobody could see it. I think there is, of course, many differences. One difference is the historic background, the history of the Arab world and Eastern Europe. Because in Eastern Europe, they had the memory of democracy, democratic institutions, and also the memory of a kind of middle class and the bourgeoisie that could make trade and connect to the world. And they had Europe, Western Europe, that stood ready to absorb Eastern Europe. The situation in the Mediterranean is unfortunately different. In most of these countries, they don't have the memory of democracy. And they don't have Europe that stands ready to help them, because we are in the midst of an economic crisis also. But still, I believe that it would be very important for Europe to do two things, namely to help these countries economically, because without new jobs, without new opportunities, then the revolutions can be turned down. The second thing I think it's very important is to build institutions in these countries, democratic institutions and rule of law. Because, as I said, the problems that they had in the communist world, which I still have in the Arab world, is the lack of freedom, the lack of checks and balances in the systems. If you don't have a free press, you always get corruption, you always get mismanagement, and you always get instability, and you always get revolution. Make no mistake, I think we are living in a world where people know about the universal rights, and the quest for freedom is there everywhere. So I think that all the authoritarian regimes we have in the world today will be overrun, sooner or later, also because what I said, when you don't have a free press, when you don't have freedom of expression, if you don't have checks and balances in the system, you always get this mismanagement and corruption which people cannot tolerate. So, but I think it's important also to recognize two things. One is that the people living in the South Mediterranean and the Arab world, the changes should be self-driven. What we should, Europe should pay respect to the dignity of these people. We should not impose anything on them. We should cooperate with the people there if they so want. It must be demand-driven. All the assistance from Europe and the United States and elsewhere should be demand-driven. My last point would be to say that I hope very much that Israel is understanding what is going on. Democracies can be challenging. I don't believe that new democracies in this region will be nicer with Israel immediately, but it depends very much on Israel. If Israel uses this opportunity to make peace with the Palestinians, I'm quite sure that democracies will be nicer with Israel than the regimes that we have had in the past. So this must also be an opportunity for Israel, and also a necessity. It is a necessity for Israel to understand that these revolutions will also influence Israel at the end of the day. So this is, I mean, if we get a new world order based on peace between Palestinians and Israel and emerging democracies in this region, it will be an enormous advantage for Europe and the rest of the world. Thank you.
So, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me stay within the European limits, even though our conference has a worldwide reach. Being a Czech politician, I am extremely interested in experience and opinions on current global economic crisis of Mediterranean countries such as Slovenia, Croatia, or in Cyprus or Israel or others. This is mainly due to the fact that I am an opponent of long-standing passive approach of small countries to the unhealthy and rapid pace of European integration, which is not positively reflected in the area of economy, ecology, energy, and efficiency, and not even in the European security issues. I am very much support the opinion that the basic economic laws cannot be left out, just like you cannot replace the real ecology within fundamentalism, fanatism, or hysteria against the nuclear power on dictated risk-free eco-business, with so-called renewable energy sources. Furthermore, I am of the opinion that the current security buzz and the fight against international terrorism cannot be resolved by being passive. hiding our head down in the sand, or even by running away from the Euro-Atlantic links. I also think that the freedom of nations and citizens in advised democratic system ends at the point where it does no longer respect their actual situation, culturality, and historical experience in the interest of meaningless uniformity. The same applies to the African and Asian part of the Mediterranean Sea. Our respect to this area also means respect to the European part. Only this will ensure that the entire Mediterranean remains the area of peace and economic as well as political cooperation. Any political or economical unrest and instability can have an immediate negative effect on all the countries within the area. To conclude, let me pose the following question to you. Is it not true that the current issue of European integration are caused by the strategy of redistribution and more debts? Is it not about time to finally start an open discussion on the real impact of the Arabian Revolution on the European Union vis-à-vis the Arabian world? Thank you for your attention.
This was an admirably concise opening statement, and I hope we will hear more from you shortly in the discussion. But meanwhile, let me ask the Tunisian Deputy Foreign Minister, please.
Well, thank you very much. I am really happy indeed to be part of this panel. We had this morning a very instructive and stimulating discussion on the power of the future, and I hope in this panel we'll be focusing on the area which is close to my country, which is important not only for Europe, but for the whole world. I am sure that what is going on in the Mediterranean area, this unprecedented transformation, will have an impact not on the near future, but also for the mid and long-term future on the population living around the Mediterranean. These, as it was said this morning, these drastic events and drastic changes happen normally once every 50 years and sometimes every century. They are what is happening in the Mediterranean, as it was rightly said by Mr. Jagland right now, is similar to what happens in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall. It will have an impact not on the south flank of the Mediterranean countries, but I am sure it will have an impact also on Europe and beyond Europe. It started, as you know, this what we call Arab Spring started in Tunisia. And Tunisia was not because Tunisia was living severe poverty, not because Tunisia was lacking economic growth, not because the country was lacking education. In the contrary, Tunisia was realizing almost 5% growth every year for the last 2 decades. It had a quite prosperity, and it had a very good educational system. It happened because the thirst of the people for more democratic system, the people who are feeling and were witnessing that prosperity was not equally shared. So it was a revolution against badly shared prosperity among generation, among people, but also among region within the same country. It had, and it's having, a very important impact on the system which was running the country for the last 50 years. The challenges are quite high because Tunisia, as I said earlier, has normal parameters to succeed in this revolution and to make a successful transition. But still, the challenges are very high because we have to manage an explosion of democracy. Today, in Tunisia, we have 110 parties, political parties. We have around 20 television, around 25 new radios. It's an explosion of information, explosion of democracy. People are willing to change everything and immediately. So people and the population which were under despotic rule for a number of years are impatient. They wanted it right now and immediately, and they wanted to see visible results. This put the transitional government running the country now, and the government which will come out of the coming election on next October, 23rd of October, under due pressure. We have in Tunisia a traditional and a solid public service, which goes back before the colonization of the country by the French. But still, we have an administration which is running well the country. It ran the country under the Bourguiba rule and under Ben Ali, and still running the country within the upheaval which we are witnessing now in Tunisia. We have also a quite educated people, but still, the challenges are very high. And here, I would like to say that challenges are not concerning Tunisia, but they are concerning the whole South Mediterranean country. As you know, these Arab Spring was triggered by Tunisia, but spread, and is going to spread, as it was rightly said, to many other despotic regimes. So there must be an international and particularly regional conscious that this does not concern just one country and one region. It concerns, of course, typically Tunisia and Libya and Egypt, but also it concerns the whole region. And here, as it was rightly said by Mr. Jagland, the East Europe found in Western Europe a very good and very strong supporter to accompany the reforms going on in Eastern Europe, not only from the economic point of view, but also from the legal, from the normative point of view. We need support to manage media. So media could be a tool for development, but not focusing on trivial and sensational issues. We need to manage 110 parties in order to make from them few parties regulating the political system. We need to improve the education, make it equality education, so people, when they go out from university, they find the jobs. Today we have 180,000 people, graduated people from Tunisian universities without jobs, and they have been without jobs for the last 10 years. So there is an effort, special effort, in order to update their knowledge and make them compete and address the need of the economy. Of course, with our European partners, Tunisia has a very strong relationship and cooperation with the European Union. 80% of our trade, imports as well as exports, are with Europe. Our European partners had, since almost 16 years, developed a number of mechanisms to foster cooperation and relationship with Tunisia and southern Mediterranean countries. But 15 years after the Barcelona process, we witness today that we are still lagging very far behind the objective which were set by Barcelona for a common space for peace and prosperity. So I think we are here for a challenge which needs to mobilize everybody for a win-win cooperation, because what is happening, as I said, in the southern Mediterranean will impact for sure on the northern part of the Mediterranean. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And now I call on Mr. Abu Nasser, and I forgot to say in introducing him the thing he particularly asked me to mention, which is that the International Center for Consultations, of which he is the director, is the only independent think tank in Israel in which Jews and Arabs work together. Please, Mr. Abu Nasser.
A story is told about His Holiness Pope John Paul II, that people came to him at the end of his life asking him, "You are a wise man, do you see a solution for the Middle East problem?" He said, "Yes, two." How come? So he said, "Look, there are one natural and one miraculous solution. The natural one is that Jesus himself to come and solve the problem. So if this is the natural, what is the miraculous? That the two sides to reach a deal." So, unfortunately, nowadays I believe that there is more chance for the natural than for the miraculous, unfortunately. Because of four main reasons. First reason, there is a crisis of leadership. I believe it is a global phenomenon of crisis of leadership. But unlike in countries which are stable, that could afford having crisis of leadership, and you know some of those, in Israel-Palestine, the historical leadership disappeared without stabilizing, without putting an end to the conflict. And now it is difficult to talk about having in our area statesmen. It's mostly politicians. And you know politicians what they are thinking about. The second, and by the way, there is a nice joke about politicians in, if I may, I don't want anybody to be hurt, but a story told that a cow, a chicken, and a donkey were on the borders between Israel and Egypt. And forces came to them, "Look guys, it's border, it's not allowed to stay here." So the chicken came and I said, "I want to go to Egypt," because in Israel, the kibbutzes, there are some people, they want eggs day and night. In Egypt, 2-3 eggs, the farmer is happy, I am happy. The cow came with very similar story. In Israel, the kibbutzes want milk day and night, In Egypt, one bottle, 2 bottles of milk, the farmer is happy, I am happy. The donkeys came and said, "Only to Israel." "Why? But your friends are going to Egypt." He said, "Look, in Egypt, the donkey remains a donkey. In Israel, he has a chance to become parliamentarian." So, if you look at the average of the quality, and not only, unfortunately, of Israeli parliamentarians, of others as well, but mainly Israelis, it is down systematically. The second, I told you first, we have a crisis of leadership. Second major problem or challenge is lack of mutual understanding. Israelis and Arabs, unfortunately, after about a century of conflict, don't understand each other. There are two dominant schools in the two sides. I call it the underestimate and overestimate. There are some Arabs and Muslims who believe that what doesn't come with force comes with more force. And there are some Arabs who believe that the way to Washington passes through Tel Aviv. On the other hand, there are Israelis who believe that Arabs know only language of force. The best thing is to eliminate. A good Arab is a dead Arab. And there are some Israelis who think that Jews are the brains and Arabs are the feet and the hands. We should think for them. Unfortunately, I do believe as long as Arabs don't understand the impact of the Holocaust on the Jewish political thinking, and as long as Jews don't understand the impact of Nakba, 1948 catastrophe, on Arab political thinking, there will be no peace. I'm not saying to agree, to understand. Unfortunately, nowadays, Palestinians learn Hebrew in prisons, and Israelis learn Arabic in secret services. This is not healthy. This is not healthy way to create neighborhood. The third problem or third challenge, and here some people would excuse me, there is no international community. Nobody is able to press Netanyahu, even the most superpower. It is a fact, and many people in Washington make electoral calculations than from something else. And it is a fact that President Obama offered a very interesting speech. I wouldn't subscribe to it, but okay, the Palestinians were ready to subscribe to it. But nobody is able to get even a quote from the Israeli Prime Minister subscribing to it. Fourth problem, or fourth challenge, is lack of good understanding to the developments, mainly in the region. I agree with Mr. Jagland. I do fear that Israel is misunderstanding what's happening around it. Some Israelis are terribly, extremely worried, oh, Islamists are coming, they will rule the world, etc. Others are saying, no, the Arabs are dust, etc. But the bottom line, Israel is not treating things as it should be. Better to understand. I do believe that Israel missed the opportunity of Yasser Arafat. I fear that Israel will miss the opportunity of Mahmoud Abbas. What Mahmoud Abbas could offer now, his successor, I'm not sure that he will be able to offer. What Arafat was able to offer, Abbas is not able to offer. I do believe that Israel is missing a golden opportunity. What I'm advising many times, why Israel should be part of, or even if the Arabs are problem makers, let us assume that you are right. Why to be part of this problem? Solve the problem with them and finish. Now there are Arabs who are ready to sell for cheap. What is the West Bank and Gaza? It is 22% of mandatory Palestine. And it is the garbage of Palestine. I'm sorry for my language. But, you know, the best part of Palestine became Israel, historically. So maybe for the Jews it is a concession, but we are talking about concessions. On the other hand, I also do afraid that the Palestinians don't understand the surrounding. Going to UN, they think that they are going to wedding. We are going to dance, clap hands. What after? You have a partner at home. So things will change. And here, you will have partner at home. It means that going to UN, regardless what will be the results, what after? Who will come? Israel is not Saddam Hussein. Israel is not Milosevic. Who will come to say to the Israeli troops, please, go away? Nobody, even not the Arabs. So I believe that without good understanding or good reading to the developments around, it is difficult to reach something. Now, I want to conclude by saying I don't see things as black as I described till now. Despite everything, I do believe that there is some hope. One of the signals of hope is what's happening in the Arab world. Although that I call it long-lasting Arab turmoil. I don't call it a real spring because in some cases it might not turn to be a spring and even not autumn. Nowadays what is essentially needed is a kind of damage control. I do believe that as long as Prime Minister Netanyahu is in power, the chances for peace are close to zero, from down, not from up. And, well, the gentleman is not convinced ideologically and practically, because if he is convinced at least to do something, he would change his coalition. And the fact that he is not even ready to listen about changing his coalition, it tells a lot. And he is calm. He is right, but I do believe that in the long run, he is hurting Israel's national interests. What could be done is damage control. And one of the, and I have 4 concrete ideas for damage control that I would be ready to elaborate afterwards. First, in Israel-Palestine, there is no real interreligious dialogue. People are living side by side. I call it coexistence of hummus. You know, hummus is a traditional Arab dish. In the best circumstances, Jews come and eat Arab dish, but go home. no dialogue. It is not a way to live together. And here we don't need interreligious dialogue amongst senior clerics, but amongst people. And I think it is possible amongst youth, amongst teachers, amongst different groups of the society. Second, we need more interaction, both by the Arabs and by the international community, with the various categories who have impact on Israel. You know, Israel is like a kind of turtle. When non-Israeli is criticizing it, it comes inside and starts shooting to all directions. Israel is ruled mainly by 5 main categories. Generals, it means security people, rabbis, businessmen, journalists, and mayors. We as Arabs, we failed talking to those, and if talking to those, not systematically. Israel is a unique creature. We have to behave a unique way. Otherwise, it is difficult. You know, sometimes, you know, I'm laughing, you know, that some diplomats are coming, falling in Tel Aviv. They think that they will make peace in 2 meals. It's difficult, you know. 2 meals or even 200 will not solve the problem. But I do believe that there is a need for a Palestinian campaign, but also international campaign to address the Israelis, to talk to the Israelis, hoping that they will change. And I can tell you, I don't think that the Israelis will not change. They will change. And the Israeli current protests in Israel against the prime minister, against the government, it is a good signal, although that I know that the prime minister has plans to kill it and he might succeed. Third, I do believe that the international community, especially Europe, has to promote more pluralism, pluralistic thinking in the Middle East. In Israel, as in the Arab world, unfortunately, there is no much pluralism by education. We need re-education, not less than money, not less than anything else. Fourth, I do really believe that it is important to try to find, especially use the current crisis era to strengthen minorities. And I do believe that Arabs in Israel, who are 20% of the population, neglected by Israel, neglected by the Arabs, could be like Nokia, connecting people instead of being dislinked from their society. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And now I feel I should challenge you all, because we've had 4 very interesting presentations, but I'm not sure that we've really heard about the search for a new world order in the Mediterranean. And I'm not actually sure why there should be a world order in the Mediterranean more than any other part of the world, but at least we could have perhaps a new order, whether a world order or not, in the Mediterranean. But this would imply that we on the different sides of the Mediterranean would have some sort of joint project that we should embark on, which would be beneficial to both sides. And so I think we need to get out of our European and Arab skins a little bit and look at it from each other's point of view. And I would like to ask you again, just very briefly, to give your thoughts after hearing from the other speakers. What constructive thing could be done in the near future by Europeans and Arabs together, taking this opportunity of the great desire for freedom that the Arab peoples have been expressing before our eyes? What could we do together to build a better order in the Mediterranean? Secretary General, just 2 words on that.
This is a very important question. The Council of Europe, which I represent, we can do actually a lot, and we have offered Tunisia and Morocco to assist them in building institutions, making new laws, constitutional changes. We have expertise on that, which is recognized worldwide, being used by many countries all over the world. We are working now, we have an action plan with Morocco. We hope we can do the same with Tunisia. And I would say that Tunisia is a key country here. because, as you said yourself, Minister, you have the background and also the structure in the society, which probably makes it easier to do the right things there than in many other countries in the region. So if we are able to build institutions and rule of law in Tunisia, I think it could be spreading to many other countries. And as I said, from our side, we stand ready to use our instruments and expertise in that respect. This can be our contribution. And as you mentioned, the situation for the minorities in the region. We have an excellent convention which is open for accession for non-European states, which would then guarantee the rights of the minorities in the region. And it could be an idea for many countries in that region to accede to this convention, as well as some other conventions that are open for accession from non-European states.
Ambassador Janawi, is that the kind of response from Europe that you are looking for? And have you got suggestions of your own of what you think could be the European contribution to this new Mediterranean order?
Well, thank you very much. I think time is ripe for innovative ideas. We have experienced for the last 20 years a number of tools in order from the European side to help and to develop cooperation with the southern Mediterranean countries. But as I said earlier, it was not great success. We need more innovative ideas in order to make, we need a locomotive. We need a locomotive. We need an engine which will draw these countries from backwardness to developed countries, from countries which are lacking democracy to more democratic countries. And here Europe, because of historical reasons, because of geographical proximity, because of common interest, has a major role to play. And I would say that since January, Europe made generous proposals, but the problem is the implementation. We need more concrete steps towards these very good ideas which were presented right now and other ideas. The problem is not just economic. The problem is of building a new society. Because, as you said it earlier, democracy is not deep-rooted in our part of the world, not because of lack of will of the people, because colonization in Tunisia and Morocco and and in Egypt didn't help these societies become a democratic societies. For the last century, colonial powers didn't help us having a free, pluralist, democratic society, and unfortunately the state coming after the independence was a state, the priority of those states were to build a strong, centralized structure in order to manage the population. Now we are starting a new era, and that new era needs from our partners in Europe and elsewhere new and innovative ideas. Coming back to what my good friend Wadia Abu Nassar said about Israel, I think it's because what is happening in the world, Arab world is very closely linked with the peace, with the Palestinian and the Middle East issue. Now, I think it's timely that the international community will focus on a way how to find a solution to that pending issue which was pending for the last 60 years. In 1993, when Oslo process was started, we had the hope that both parties were going towards a settlement. But unfortunately, almost 18 years after, we're still in the deadlock because of a lack, and let's say it, because of a lack of the international community to force both parties to go and settle this issue. There will be no peace, no stability, no prosperity, even if we become the most democratic nation in that part of the world without solving this issue, because this issue you know, in our civil society in Tunisia, which is quite far from the Middle East and the Palestinian issue. It's a major issue. It's an issue of debate going on through the social network, but also through the political society. And there are even people who are, you know, willing to put it in the next constitution that there is no normalization with Israel unless, you know, I mean, they are insisting to put it in the next constitution because they consider this issue as a major, you know, emotional and political issue touching the whole Arab world.
Thank you. Dr. Sobotka, you come from a country which has the experience of transition to democracy in the recent past. I'm sure you played a part in it and you remember it very well. Do you think you can help the Tunisians and other Arabs to make a similar transition from dictatorship to democracy?
Yes, we had and have a big experience with transformation from totalitarian system to democratic system. But I think, and I'm afraid, that in Arabic countries, after these revolutions, will be problem because experiences of the people is bigger. Expectation, is bigger than will be a result. And it will be a very nervous moment for people and for a future. And every country from EU, from every country of the world can help, but you must do more and more, not only as a signals, but realize some political style, because I don't know if it will be democracy. You told about it. It will be step by step, and I think that for me it's a very, very dangerous moment.
Thank you. And if I could ask Mr. Abu Nasser,
Yeah.
we know, I think we all feel that if there is an international community, we are all members of it. And I'm sure we are all conscious of our responsibilities towards the Arab-Israel or Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and we should do more. But can you think or say whether you feel this idea of a new order in the Mediterranean, is that something that can contribute to a solution, or is it something that can only happen if we solve this Arab-Israel problem first?
Unfortunately, we are not foreseeing world order. The United States is not able to end the dispute between Israel and Turkey. So how it will
Can we leave the United States out and think about the Mediterranean?
Well, the Mediterranean, tell me, the EU are worse than the Arabs. So where is the EU? What is the EU? What they are going to do? You know, it is, let us be frank, I believe that one has to be realistic. Instead of talking about general terms, world order, etc., we have to go practical. How to go practical? In adopting 3 parallel tracks. First track, to be better friend of Israel. Many European and Americans are coming to Tel Aviv and suddenly are behaving like rabbits. They are listening more than talking. Okay, they want to be rabbits, good for them. But I believe, be good friend of Israel. If you are a good friend of someone, you advise him. You don't send him to hell. I do believe that Israel has a critical role to play in the stability of the region, if we wish or not. And I do believe Israel will do well for itself, not for the Arabs, for itself, to change today before tomorrow, because I'm not sure that tomorrow will be better. The second practical thing that should happen, I do believe that what we need is to, especially Europeans, to act wisely in the Arab world. Why? Because many Europeans are like somehow like the Israeli right wing or like the Islamists. What is the similarity? Right wing in Israel and Islamists think what doesn't come with force comes with more force. Europeans believe what doesn't come with money comes with more money. But there is no money. And who says money is corrupting? And I can tell you a lot of facts and figures about where money of your taxpayers is going in different parts of the Middle East and other places in the world. I do believe that there is a need to move from mentality of donation to the mentality of investments, to try really to move. I do believe also that Europe next year maybe will not have anything to donate. So third parallel track, I do believe, again, we need essentially a kind of true friendship to work together for re-educational projects. What people need more than anything else, I am, for instance, I'm coming from a Christian background, but I am against aid to Christians in the Middle East. Christians should be part of their respective societies, not on the margin, and should not be treated as Christians or Muslims or Jews or elsewhere, but as human beings. When people have strong education in their patriotism, they contribute to their society. I want to finish by telling you something. One century ago, the Carmelite fathers in my hometown, Haifa, in northern Israel, they gave pieces of lands and properties to many Christians. Why? To stay. 90% of those left. Why? Because they were not strong in their identity. So they took it as for granted. The same now, Europe has been pumping to the Palestinians the largest amount of aid per capita in the last 15 years. What is the outcome? The Europeans are funding indirectly the Israeli occupation. Good for you, but not for the Palestinians. So I'm coming to say we should, all of us, we should think about making a switch in our way of thinking, in our way of performance, and puzzles will bring order. Order will not be imposed from upon.
Thank you. Mr. Orel, your 4 points. Are they about a new order in the Mediterranean? Because that is the subject of this discussion.
Yes, I will answer.
I believe you can do it from down there, and there is a lady with a microphone.
And in the event in Mediterranean zone. European Union what was the role of European Union? There was no role. Even now, European Union does not take any decision. Writing about the conflict of interest rivalry between Italy and France, about the gas and oil contracts. Arab states have different interests too. So we see the situation when Libya can be transformed in new Somalia, and Tripoli, Somalia or Afghanistan. And some Italian analysts directly spoke about it, about this danger. Third, jihadist groups such as Libyan Islamic Fighting Group and Al-Qaeda see the tumult in Libya as a huge opportunity. If the situation in Libya will not improve immediately, they will have a very huge base for increasing their role. And the last, fourth, Middle East, as we heard here, remains highly vulnerable. So it's very difficult to exclude Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Israeli preoccupations of its security are as high as never before. All this comes in the situation when European Union is dealing with his crisis, United States' presence in the region is seriously diminishing, and when we discuss only the situation on our conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The gentleman over there, please. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Anton Bebler. I'm professor at the University of Ljubljana, and I'm a fellow of Salzburg Seminar, Mr. Mortimer. Secretary General Jagland raised drew a parallel between the democratic wave in Eastern Europe about 20 years ago and the Arab Spring and the unrest and all the developments in mostly in our world. I have a somewhat different view of this related to this comparison. There are more differences than similarities between the two waves. First of all, most East European communist regimes were imposed on those countries by an outside power, and they, once they were left in cold and rain by the dominant power, they crumbled. Nothing of the kind happened in the Arab world. No Arab regime was imposed from outside. Secondly, the democratic wave in Eastern Europe produced a radical geopolitical change on the European continent. It brought about the breakdown of the global superpower, the Soviet Union, of the Warsaw Pact, and it changed a geopolitical orientation in Eastern Europe. Nothing of the kind has happened in our world, and is not likely to happen in our world. There will be no major geopolitical orientation. There will be some changes related to Israel, for instance, but not related to major international powers. Then the democratic wave in Eastern Europe produced, of course with some simplification, a radical change or radical changes of their political systems, of the economic systems, and of the economic policies. Nothing similar to that, of the magnitude, has happened in our world. There have been hopes, of course, among some West European leftists that the Arab Spring would create a new kind of mass democracy, different from party-dominated democracies in the West. But really, it did not happen, and it's not likely to happen. The most substantive change of a political system happened so far among all Arab countries only in Tunisia. And even in Tunisia, this change could not be called revolutionary. It's more evolutionary, except for the flight of the dictator and his family. In Egypt, the dictator and his two sons were put on trial, but Egypt is still under military dictatorship. The most radical and revolutionary change is happening nowadays in Libya. But even that could not have happened without a massive military intervention by NATO. Nothing of the kind could have happened. So throughout the Arab world, we have not seen a radical political transformation. And that is, and of course I would agree with the previous speaker in my criticism of European Union's highly ineffective policy related to the Southern Mediterranean, and the European Union's passivity in resolving the key and the most burning conflict in the Middle East, and that is Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador, do you want to answer any of those points?
Well, I think I share some of the observation made by the last speaker. Of course, there is no common similarities between what was going in the Eastern European countries and what is going now in the Arab world. But still, the challenges are almost the same. We are living in transitional period. These changes differ from one country to another. The case of Tunisia is different from the case of Egypt. And you are right also to say that the case in Libya is quite different. But still, I think these new phenomena happening in these countries will have an impact on the whole region and will be having an impact on Europe and beyond that. So it is a responsibility for the neighboring countries of the Mediterranean to tackle the issues which are facing these countries. Some countries will be successful more than the others. The pace of reforms will be quicker in some countries than others because of different history, because of different systems. But still we have common features for the whole region. And I think I don't agree with the first speaker about Libya. He's presenting Libya that it's going to be invested by Al-Qaeda or by Islamist groups. In the movement which happened in Libya, which was helped also, of course, by NATO, showed that there are different political factions in Libya. And I can tell you from a neighboring country which has a strong and vital relation with Libya that the majority of the people which, and the faction which worked against the regime of Gaddafi, they were not from Al-Qaeda or from Islamists. There are some of them, but still they don't have the majority, and we are hope, and I think there is also here a responsibility for neighboring countries, but also for the international community to help Libya go out of that system, go through that change, and settle a democratic, pluralist government in the country. And that's possible.
Thank you. Mr. Jagland.
Well, I spoke about some of the differences that you also did. Because one of the main differences is that Eastern Europe was part of a continent that was well organized and could be, and the new democracies there and the new states there could be connected to this immediately, economically as well as with regard to standards and institutions. This is the main difference. But the similarity is that what was behind the revolutions in Eastern Europe was a quest for freedom, for human rights, and that people had the right to live a decent life. I think there is a lot of prejudices regarding the people in the Arab world, namely, which I think you a little bit conveyed, excuse me, but well, democracy is not possible in the people there. They are not up for this. There will always be a kind of authoritarian regime there for certain reasons, which nobody can exactly explain, but just, well, it has always been like this and it will be like this. I don't believe it. I have been traveling in this region for 30 years, and my observation is that people in this region is like us. They want to live a normal life, to raise their children, to have education, to have jobs, to have welfare, to be able to travel. And this is what is behind the revolution, that people want to live a normal life as all others. So if you look away from this fact, then we are suffering from the same disease that political leaders had in Europe in 1989. They believed that Eastern Europe could never be free, because they were bound to this communism. It was not true. So, I mean, I think we need to understand that there are two main forces in the world which has been on since the Second World War, which has been strengthened now during the last years. It is globalization. You have to connect to the global community in order to achieve welfare and all this. And it is the quest for universal rights. The last one is the strongest political force in the world today, that people want to have freedom and live a normal life. And this is what is changing now in the Middle East. If you don't believe in this, then I think there are a lot of problems, but I'm quite sure that things are going in the right direction.
Well, we cannot hold you responsible for the failings of the European Union.
No, that's
because
right.
You represent the Council of Europe and you come from Norway, which is outside the European Union. But maybe Dr. Subotka would like to say something about that.
So, may I comment on a colleague about EU and problems with revolutions in Arabic part of Mediterranean region, that EU was passive. Yes, because EU had and has biggest problems with crisis, financial and economic, and now big problems in south part of EU, Greece and so on. And I think our inner problems of EU were bigger than the situation, but I think that it was mistake.
Thank you. Maybe we could take two more, because there are two gentlemen over there. The microphone is close to them.
Christian Jerschitz, Austrian television, Balkan correspondent. I have two short questions. The first is to Mr. Ambassador from Tunisia. I mean, having in mind what the European Union has so far done or not done in the Balkans, because it didn't find a common policy on Kosovo, because 5 countries have not recognized Kosovo, where we have big difficulties in Bosnia to overcome the crisis. I mean, how do you see European common policy, if such a kind of common policy exists towards your country? I mean, European Union had a lot of lack of knowledge of the Balkans. Maybe they have the same lack of knowledge now concerning the Arabic world, and money is not a solution. So what are your remarks on the behavior now of European states and European Union? This is the first question. And the second question is to the gentleman, to Mr. Abu Nasser. Thank you very much. All your comments sounds for us very similar when we are talking about Balkans and European approach to the Balkan countries, where a lot of money was wasted too. But could you focus a little bit also on the situation in Syria? In Syria, what does this mean? What is your perspective? Where to use this perspective? And what means the change of the, obviously change of the Turkish-Israel relations for the whole situation in which Israel is now? Thank you.
Yes, that gentleman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike Capes, MP from the UK. I want to just make 2 points. Firstly, yes, the situation in Libya has been a success for the UN, a success for NATO, a success for British-French cooperation, and a failure for the European Union. But that is because the European Union is incapable. Also, at the moment, the European Union is incapable of taking a collective decision on the Palestinian issue. There are problems because of the 27 member states, the fact that we are all democratic parliaments and we have different national defence interests and foreign policies. That will always be the case, I believe, even if there's much greater economic integration. It's a fact of life, and I think we just have to understand that. But that doesn't mean we can be passive. There are this huge increase in population in North Africa. Most of it, the very, very large number of very young children. We need a massive program of creating jobs and employment. And another issue that the European Union will have to confront, if it doesn't deal with that, is there will be huge migrant movements across. Go to Malta. See what the Maltese are dealing with today, and you understand what might happen in 10, 15, 20 years' time. And so I think that the panel somebody could comment on those issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The lady here, please.
My name is Deborah Barenboim. I am the Brazilian ambassador in Ljubljana. First of all, I would like to remind that we have here in Slovenia the Emuni University, which is a beautiful initiative on inter-Mediterranean studies. It was born after 2005 intercultural initiative from Spain. Miriam Mosgan can correct me if I'm wrong, but it is an important initiative for inter-Mediterranean dialogue, quite active in Porto Rocha, a city in the south, in the coast, Adriatic coast of Slovenia. And we should take knowledge of it and the fantastic work that it is doing for the dialogue, into the Mediterranean dialogue. Second, as a Brazilian ambassador, I'd like to remind that Brazil has recognized the independence of Palestine, that we are working actively with other Latin American countries to get this issue to New York in the next General Assembly of United Nations. We have in Brazil a huge Arabic community coexisting and with a lot of cultural exchanges and everything with the Jewish community. We like to remember that the president of the Federation of Industries of São Paulo is from Lebanese origin and his vice president is a Jew. And they work together normally and they never remember even that they are somehow from different backgrounds. So we believe in Brazil that this is totally possible. We believe in dialogue. We have been supporting, we have for a long time a representation in Ramallah, a lady colleague of mine that is doing a fantastic job there. And Mr. Abu Nasser, I'm sorry, but I think that the world has been we are not helping Israel by understanding anymore the Israeli government. We help Israel by saying enough is enough, it's time to recognize Palestine. So I disagree a little bit with what you said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, let's have a quick round of answers from the panel, and then we'll have one more set of questions. We have to finish at 6:15. Which of the panel would like to answer those remarks? Yes, Ambassador.
Well, what are our expectations of the European Union? I think they are quite large and important. First, I think we expect from the European Union to treat Tunisia and other southern Mediterranean countries like they have treated members like Portugal or Greece without being members of the European Union, or even, in that matter, Slovenia and all other Eastern European countries. Prodi, the former chairman of the European Commission, visited Tunisia in 2003, and he proposed, he said, the new partnership, the new neighborhood policy offers the partners all except institutions. What we expect from the European Union is not just financial aid, is to open the agency of the European Union to our researchers to come and improve their scientific research skills, to open the market for agricultural products coming from southern flank of the European Union, to have a better balanced policy regarding immigration. So immigration should not be a threat to the social cohesion of European societies, but as enriching these societies and address the causes which encourage these immigrants coming from southern Mediterranean countries to Europe by developing projects and giving jobs to the people in that part of the world. There are some optimistic look to what is going on now in the Arab world, because what is happening in Libya, in Egypt, and in Tunisia I think will offer new opportunities for the population of these countries, because there will be common, I hope, common agenda and common features. There will be maybe free trade market among those countries, and this will give opportunities not only for the business people from these three countries and others who will follow, but also give opportunity for European businessmen and European investors who are looking for new opportunity for investment. Thank you.
Mr. Abu Nasser?
Just referring to 3 points. First, concerning Syria, I do believe, and I do hope to be wrong, but I do believe that we would witness long-lasting bloodshed in Syria for 3 main reasons. First, the international community is hesitating. And this hesitation, unlike, for instance, the intervention in Libya, this postponement of lack of intervention would make it longer and longer. Second, unlike the situation in Tunis or in Egypt, Syria, Libya, and to a certain extent Yemen, it is family business. The family is ruling, and the family will fight till the last minute to remain. So even if Assad wants to resign, his family will not allow him. So, and his sect in Syria, it is more complicated because there is a sect that its future was linked and its fate was linked to the regime. So it is a serious challenge. The third is the dilemma of the Syrian opposition. First, the Syrian opposition is not united. Second, they have now tough philosophical debates to use violence or not to use violence. If to use violence, maybe they would gain more, they will threaten more the regime, but the regime could argue that these guys are bloody criminals. But if they will not use violence, they will be like a chicken, you know, just in the road, you know. So it is a serious challenge, and by the way, I'm not sure that many people want Assad to be replaced, and not only in the Middle East. So I'm not sure, by the way, that Israel is interested in Assad's replacement. Concerning Israel-Turkey, I do believe it is very sad, but the two countries, and by the way, it is a very clear reflection how lack of understanding is bringing more and more problems. Israel and Turkey, I do believe, do not understand each other very well. And now the problem is even becoming personal. It is Netanyahu vis-à-vis Erdogan. I hope to be wrong, but I do believe one of the two must go in order to have improvement in the bilateral relationship. Third, about understanding, or I agree that enough is enough, should be told to Israel, etc. But again, we say to Israel, enough is enough. We voted. You know what? Even if Israel will vote in the UN in favor of the Palestinians, so what? What will happen on the field? President Abbas, in order to go to the toilet, he needs Israeli permit. So what is this sovereignty? So come on, Israel, you know, no Palestinian could move out or in, you know, without Israeli permit. What, you know, it is, I tell you, going to UN, it is mainly face-saving to Abbas because he's a failure story. He failed to have reconciliation, he lost Gaza, he failed to have negotiations with Israel. So this is the only card that he has. I understand him, but I don't agree. So what after UN vote? What after? This is a challenge. I am in favor of independent Palestinian state. Unfortunately, nowadays, it is difficult to find Israelis and Palestinians who are convinced in the two-state solution. So it is very sad reality, but I do believe, again, it is the tough way, the hard way, but we should work inside Israel. Palestine, if ever will get independence, it will get it from Tel Aviv, not from the UN, not from New York. Israel is a unique creature. As such, we need unique treatment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, if you don't mind, I would take the more further questions from the floor and then come back to the European speakers.
Thank you. Paul Fritsch from the OSCE. As the OSCE representative in the room, I feel a need to come in and compliment some of the things that Secretary General Jagland has said. because we've been having a very similar discussion within the OSCE about how our tools and experience might be of relevance to our Mediterranean partners. And we have in many ways, our tools and experience on democratic institution building are similar to those of the Council of Europe. But in addition, we bring a concept of cross-dimensional security. We do things like police training and border management that might also be relevant. And we have an existing framework of a Mediterranean partnership that we've had for the last 36 years. And we've already had contacts. Our chairman in office was in Tunisia and in Morocco. Our Secretary General was just in Cairo last week, so this is a very active discussion. I think it's useful for us not to get caught up in the debate, is what's going on in the southern Mediterranean right now exactly the same as what happened in Eastern Europe 20 years ago, or is it completely different? I think there are enough similarities and enough common challenges that it's in the interest of the states of the southern Mediterranean to take what they find useful of the experience of the European and Euro-Atlantic Eurasian community over the last 20 years, and to apply that to their situations. And I think it's clearly in the interest of those of us north of the Mediterranean to offer that experience and be generous and offer that experience, keeping in mind the need for ownership by the peoples and the states of the region. But I think it's also important for us not as individual organizations to go rushing to each of these capitals and charging forward in developing our own programs of cooperation. It's very important that we have a serious discussion about which organization can do what best, taking account of experience, taking account of capabilities, taking account of how we're going to be perceived in the region. And I think there's going to be a meeting in New York under UN auspices in a couple of weeks that's aimed at getting this kind of cooperation and coordination going. So I just wanted to mention those factors and keep the OSCE on the map alongside our good friends and partners in the Council of Europe.
Thank you very much. The gentleman here in the third row.
Thank you. My name is Hassan Leiti from Egypt. And actually, we have the experience of the Mediterranean project, which was launched a couple of years earlier. And I believe it has proven not to be a great success, on the contrary. And this brings us necessarily to the political problem, because the potentials of the region are huge enough to absorb all the possibilities of all countries, not only the Mediterranean countries in both sides, but also even the Eastern European countries, talking about a mega project like the solar project, for instance, for renewable energy. So it was due to the fact that the problem between Israel and Palestine was not solved, that it has come to stand still, and we have to move forward afterwards if we can solve the problem. And I agree very much with the idea that it is about time that all international players should play their own role to solve the problem. It is not that up to the one side to say, I'm not doing it this way. It is the international will that should be accepted and should be respected as well when it comes to international resolutions and the positions declared. The European Union in December 2009 has declared very clearly, you know, the references of the peace settlement.
Emma, don't go away. I was going to ask you to say something, please. Sorry, but we have very little time, so finish quickly.
Okay. So I think it's about time, and time is coming in the General Assembly or whatever in the United Nations, and I think the European Union should show the position that, you know, it's not for the sake of recognizing Palestine, it is only for pushing the position of the negotiator on the other side a little bit forward when it comes to negotiating with Israel. So this is a very, if I may add something, the driving force, you know, the difference between Eastern democracy and our democracy in the future, I hope. It was clear for the European side the driving force. At the end of the road there is the European Union, and I believe it's our duty to kind of create a driving force of that nature, that people who would adopt the ideas of democracy, the governance of the good governance and the rule of law will find that at the end. So the driving force should be needed. The last comment...
I'm so sorry. I'm afraid that's enough. It's actually, I will be in trouble already because we're supposed to finish now. But I do think we should not finish without hearing from Emma Bonino, who is the Vice President of the Italian Senate and who is more involved in these issues than most, I think I'm right in saying.
No. Well, thank you very much, but it's the usual comments that I keep making in all these kinds of debate. And the real truth is that in our diplomacy and capitals and so on and so forth, we felt much better with the previous regime. And we are sort of nostalgic of the previous time. Because we knew them, because in some way we knew how to deal with them, because. So we were taken totally by surprise, and now we are scrambling with the idea of what to do. At this point, I just have two suggestions. We were on the wrong side for a long time. Let's avoid to be on the wrong side for the future, or the present. Secondly, like it or not, it happened. And there is no way of wasting time of being nostalgic of the previous time. Third, it will be complex, yes. Contradictory, yes. One step forward, three ways backward, all right. But nothing will be as before. So we cannot simply use the past policy for a new situation. And when I think, and finally, and I conclude, when I see that we are dealing with this new situation with the old tools and trying to see that we will help with the 3M, money, market, and mobility, I just feel that we are hopeless. We don't understand. Money, we don't have. Market, please. Mobility, we made a drama because of 25,000 Tunisians in Italy. So I think that it's high time that we finally come to terms to the fact that we are facing a new situation and that we have basically to start from scratch. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
But it happened, and it's good that happened. And yes, there is a lot of problems, but my main issue would be how can we be more helpful? And that is the question that I don't hear about. And everybody describing the problems, the difficulties, all right, which of course is there. But the real question is, it happened, how can we help? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very quick, like one sentence each from the panel, starting with Mr.
I do believe that we need better understanding, and better understanding requires good comprehensive study for each specific case. Libya is not Tunisia, Tunisia is not Egypt, Egypt is not Yemen. We need, and many times, unfortunately, people just rush for photo opportunity. I'm sorry, you know, I have names from Europe who comes to the Middle East looking for photos and leaving. So, but not only. But what I want to tell you, I do believe that one has not to lose faith in himself and in the other. I do believe, let us be optimists, and I would like to conclude by telling you that there is a belief that all Arab rulers, those dictators, are going to hell. So when King King Hussein died, he went to God, and God told him, look, go to hell. He said, but I was good, you know, the poverty made me a dictator. He said, look, I will allow you to choose your penalty. So he went to hell, he opened the first door, found Assad, the father, on a grill. He ran away. The second door found Gaddafi hanged, ran away. Third door, he found Arafat making love with Marilyn Monroe. He got angry, went back to God. God, what's happening? Is Arafat better than me? Oh, stupid. This is the punishment of Marilyn Monroe.
Dr. Sivalka.
So, I think that it was very, very good speech. But I am happy because when I finished my speech, I had two questions. One was about EU and one was about reflection, Arabian Revolution and EU and the whole world. I am very glad that our discussion was open because it was my main sentence. We must be open in our discussion. So, colleague from the Italian Senate was very open, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Yagan.
Well, first of all, I would like to say that always when we are discussing the Middle East, the Arab world, we come back to the issue of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Well, I understand it, but now we should discuss what to do, as Emma Bonino said, to assist and interact with those who want to have democracy in the Arab world. This is the issue now. How can Europe as a whole use its unparalleled institutions and capacity in economic terms, in democratic terms, in political terms, to assist the new democratic forces in these countries? And I think that, European Union has a lot of leverage and power and economic possibilities. We in the Council of Europe, we have expertise that can be used. We should work together. It would be very good if European Union would be more united, yes, but when we talk about practical things that can be done now in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Libya, and hopefully in Syria, I think there will be a lot of unity in the European Union about these concrete things. My last point would be to say that the worst enemies of the Palestinians and Israelis are very often their best friends. They should have a more coherent policy when they talk with their friends. They very seldom do that, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last word to the Ambassador.
Thank you. I think I am going to finish on an optimistic note. I think what is happening in North Africa is something of strategic posture. North Africa will not be the same as it was before. Of course, democracy is not an instant coffee. It's not going to be there tomorrow. We are going to have up and downs, but I think the road is clear, and the population, the demands which started in Tunisia by young people, spontaneous demonstration, people looking just for dignity. There was no ideology behind it. There was no force behind it. These people are very vigilant now that what started in mid-December will continue and will lead to a democratic, different society. Here, the responsibility is not, I said it and I repeat it, is not of these countries. It's a regional responsibility. It goes for the interest of the European Union, for our neighbors, that these experiences will be a success. And I would like also to finish to say that without resolving the Palestinian issue, then we have still a bomb going on in our region, which will be manipulated and used by many forces in order to stop these revolutionary trend and democratic trend in our part of the world. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, all four of you, and to the audience. You're very lucky because the moderator was supposed to summarize the session, but you will be spared that because we've run out of time. And so I would just like to ask you to show your appreciation. Thank you very, very much.